Hello, and welcome to part 2 of the 5-part series to Mastering the Bass Drum. My name is John Frederick, and in part 2 of this series, I'm going to be talking about striking the drum and how to rotate your wrist. Now, for my technique, which I've gone through a couple of techniques, and I've talked to a lot of different professionals in the industry, and I've been taught by a couple of really master bass drummers, and for the technique that I use and the technique that I'm going to teach you is complete rotation of the forearm and keeping your wrist still. Now, I'm sure you've seen a lot of videos where they talk about, turning your forearm, of course, because you can't really play the drum without it, but also breaking your wrist. You can see how from my elbow up to my fingers, there's a little break right there. A lot of people talk about that. And, a lot of beginning bass drummers and people in middle school and high school and sometimes even college will play bass drum like this. They'll turn their forearm, but they'll also break their wrist. And the reason I do not play like that is because of long-term injury. Now, I've talked to someone who has injured their wrist and has developed carpal tunnel because of playing like this, because it's a lot of movement in the wrist. And since the mallets are a little heavier than snare drum sticks, it takes a little more effort in playing the bass drum than it does something like the snare drum. And so it's a lot of more torque going on in the wrist right here. So it's really beneficial for you to learn the technique that I'm about to teach you and mastering that technique versus breaking the wrist. Now, the bass drum technique that I'm about to teach you is complete turn of the forearm, like I mentioned before. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to lay your hand on a table, right? You're going to want to lay your forearm on a table. Keep it flat, okay? And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to rotate your forearm, keeping your wrist straight, okay? No breaking of the wrist, keeping it straight. You're going to rotate and lay your hand down and then turn it over, okay? Turn it. Turn it. Just like this. This is the motion. Okay? If you see, my elbow all the way up to the tip of my finger is a completely straight line. Okay? Now, when I turn my wrist, that straight line stays the same, right? Like so. It doesn't do this. Okay? See, I still turned my forearm. I can see the under part of my forearm right here, okay, but it doesn't have this little break right here, okay. So you're going to turn out and turn back in, turn out and turn back in. You want to make sure that you have a straight line the entire time, okay. Keeping the 45-degree angle that we talked about in the first video. You're going to want to turn out, okay, still keeping the straight line all the way up. Not doing this, right? You see the break I was talking about? Keeping it completely straight. Turn out and come in. Turn out and come in. Okay, that's the basic rotation of how to hit the bass drum. It's a lot harder than it looks, than it sounds. I remember when I first learned this technique, I was at Music City Drum Corps in 2012. And he taught me this technique, and I didn't learn it until after the season was over. And that was 2 months of playing. So it takes time, but in the long run, you're not going to be as tense in the wrist. Your wrist is not going to hurt at all. Okay, it's going to feel a little weird up in the forearm area because you're building up these muscles. But in the long run, you're not going to be hurting yourself or having any long-term injury. Okay, so keep the 45-degree angle, turning out and coming in. Like that. Now that I've taught you how to hit the drum, let's actually put it into context so you can see what it looks like. So we're in set position. Now we're going to go out to playing position and make sure the mallet is in the center of the head and your forearm is flat. Now what you don't want to do is you don't want to have your elbows next to your body, okay? You can't get very much rotation like this from the forearm, okay? So you want to make sure your elbows are out a little bit in a relaxed state. Okay, and you want to make sure that your mallets aren't too far away from the head right before they play, in tacit position as they call it. Now, you can press against the drum and then go 1 inch away from the head. And there you go. That's playing position. You're about ready to play. Now, let's turn the forearm without breaking the wrist. And let's bring the mallet in quickly. Okay? Let's do it a couple times. Let's do it a couple times pretty fast so you can see what it looks like. All right. My elbow has a little wiggle room. Okay, your elbow doesn't have to stay completely in the same position. All right, it can move around, but you're not going to break your wrist. Okay, here's breaking the wrist. Okay, you can see how my wrist is being broken. Here's how to properly play it.